For an expert's take, we are joined by Dan Arbell. He is a scholar in residence at American University's Department of History. Dan, good to have you with us. So that a senior Hezbollah commander killed in an airstrike while Mr. Blinken is touring the region. Well, what do you make of the aim and timing of this targeted operation? And how concerned are you that this could erupt into a wider regional war?
So I think that, the ongoing confrontation between Israel and Hezbollah along the Israeli-Lebanese border is a big concern. However, the two sides have not kind of upped the ante or have gone have transitioned into a full-scale engagement. There's some sort of back and forth between them, and I think that what has happened today does not exceed from the rules that have been established in recent weeks. Hezbollah hit major points in Israel's northern part, including intelligence base in Israel, and so Israel responded by launching an attack on Hezbollah, which eventually led to the killing of this leader. But I think that all efforts are being made so this will not turn into a regional war, that will not turn into a full-scale war. And this is why Antony Blinken is coming to Israel and is going to have meetings tomorrow with the Israeli leadership. This is in the footsteps of his special envoy, Amos Hochstein, who was there in previous days, both in Israel and Lebanon, trying to work out a diplomatic solution to the tensions between Israel and Hezbollah. So while there are tensions and they are running high, I don't think that any of the parties is interested in a full-scale war. And there is an attempt by the U.S. to broker a deal. It's not sure where this will be heading right now. It could eventually end up in a war, but it could also end up in a resolution in a diplomatic way. So we have to see how this develops.
Dan, we'll pick up on the deal in a few moments from now, but I want to pick up on the point you made about the Hezbollah leader, Hassan Nasrallah, and the risk of an all-out war. I mean, we know that Wissam al-Tawi is important, but we also know what Nasrallah said after the 2006 war. So is it your view right now that this is just part of the normal clashes which have been taking place at the southern Lebanon, northern Israeli border since early October?
I wouldn't call it normal. I would say that since early October, Hezbollah has been provoking with attacks against Israel, and Israel responding, and so there's this back and forth that is happening since October that has not stopped. Now, it's anything but normal. 80,000 citizens in northern Israel evacuated their homes and have fled to the center of the country. Lebanese civilians have also left southern Lebanon towards Beirut. And so it's anything but normal. However, it is what experts call low-intensity conflict. And it may remain in these parameters, but it also doesn't take a whole lot for this to turn eventually into a full-scale war. Efforts are being made to avoid that, but it's not sure that these efforts will succeed.
Mm. And then you mentioned Mr. Blinken and Israel to meet the leaders, but who have repeatedly proved resistance to pressure from Washington. What's likely to be his message that we haven't heard before in past visits, and will his trip pay off?
It hasn't started. It's hard to see whether it will pay off or not. But I would say that Israel listens to the U.S. The U.S. is Israel's main ally and backer, and so Israel has its own interests, but it listens to the United States. And the U.S. does have leverage over Israel, and the U.S. position is important. And I think Israel does not, at the end of the day, does not want a full-scale war with Hezbollah. Therefore, I think that Israel will allow the Secretary of State some leeway in trying to reach a diplomatic solution to this problem. having said that, if Israel feels that Hezbollah is crossing certain red lines and is really threatening Israeli security in a major way, then Israel will launch a full-scale attack.
Dan, let's get to what's happening in Gaza right now. Israel talking about a shift to a more targeted campaign in the Strip. First of all, what exactly does that mean? And more importantly, is this going to help Antony Blinken in his quest to, de-escalate the situation and perhaps find some form of lasting regional peace down the road?
So I think that it does help, and I think it is. The U.S. has been pushing Israel to move from this stage of a high-intensity engagement, military campaign in Gaza to a lower intensity and more targeted operations in the Gaza Strip. And so I think that the fact that this is happening as we speak is something that the U.S. wanted and will be very satisfied with. But I think that the United States wants to see Israel to more clearly define what its goals are, what its objectives are, what it is trying to achieve, and not just say it wants to destroy Hamas. It's very, it's very broad and not clear terminology. So I think that the secretary will try and speak to reason with Israeli leaders, explain to them that from Washington's point of view, Israel does not have all the time in the world or all the time that it wants, and it will have to really identify its main objectives, and according to that, also operate in a more targeted way and withdraw a lot of its forces back to Israel and act in accordance to more surgical strikes and a lower intensity level compared to what took place until now.
And then,
as for your question about peace, peace is elusive. Peace is no one is talking about peace right now. That may end up happening down the road, but not right now.
Mm. All right, then, and Washington also wants Israel's Muslim majority neighbors to play a role in Gaza's reconstruction, governance, and potentially security there. How essential are they to any post-war scenario? And do you see that working?
So, yeah, I think you're right. They're very important. And I think Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Egypt, Jordan, they all have an important role to play in the day after the war. And I think that they should be, helping out in the effort both to sustain, to rebuild, reconstruct Gaza, to stabilize Gaza, and support a mechanism that will be established, manned by professional Palestinians, technocratic Palestinians, who will actually govern the day-to-day affairs backed by these Arab countries. So I think that in order to have stability, in order for the transition to succeed from a war situation to a more post-war situation, I think that the Arab countries' role is extremely important, and I do sense that they are ready to make an effort, invest efforts in helping out.
Dan, just very quickly, is Israel open to this idea at all? I mean, some of the countries that have been mentioned, Saudi Arabia, UAE, for example, had earlier resisted calls for day-after scenarios. So are we looking at something significant and important here?
Yeah, I think that the Prime Minister Netanyahu is kind of reluctant to discuss day-after scenarios, but other members of cabinet, other members of the Israeli bureaucracy are already discussing it. And I think at the end of the day, Mr. Netanyahu will have to also come to a realization that it's important to identify clear objectives that concern the day after. And again, along the lines of having Arab countries involved in having a technocratic Palestinian body govern the day-to-day affairs for a transition period in which after which things can be stabilized without the help of the Arab countries. But right now, that's the main goal. And I think that Netanyahu will eventually agree to that.
All right, Dan, thank you very much for your time and your insight this morning. Dan Arbell, a scholar in residence at American University's Department of History.